Hi guys, you're live with me on Facebook, and we're going to be talking today about what not to buy in the Manhattan real estate market. And so it's an interesting time right now because we're seeing um, the last couple months, obviously during the pandemic, not much property has come in the market as everyone's pretty much been on pause. And now, as you know, starting next week, when we start to see the economy reopening, phase one, uh, real estate will be part of phase two. But just, in case you are not aware, real estate has been deemed essential services since very early in the process. And we could pretty much do everything that we normally do except for in-person visits. So I can't go to a property and meet somebody at the property and and shake your hand and walk you through. So I can do things virtually. We do virtual reality tours. We do typically we'll do a video of a property first and encourage a buyer to take a look at the property that way. And then we'll do what's called a virtual visit where we're going to go and see the I'll go to the property, I'll call you on FaceTime or Zoom, and then we walk through the property that way. Only if it's really absolutely necessary at the end do we do any sort of in-person visit, okay? But I'm not meeting you there and walking you through by your side, and we're not doing open houses. So we figure to see more property going into the market, and for people that are looking to buy, it could be a great opportunity. But I think it's really interesting to take a look at what properties that you should avoid. Now, having been in real estate as an agent and a broker for 21 years, I've been through different ups and downs in the real estate market, 2001, 911, the financial crisis, and it seems what happens is there's a little bit of a dip in the market, something happens, and then it becomes a buyer market for anywhere from a year to 3 years, depending on what part of the market we're talking about. And then it goes the other way, and then we see a ramp up in appreciation. So I put this together so hopefully you'll be able to avoid some of those pitfalls that especially can be very financially harmful in a down market. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about types of properties, okay, walk-ups or properties with a negative view. So walk-ups, obviously any building doesn't have an elevator is a walk-up, and they can present an interesting opportunity in that things can be less expensive. But in a market where there's a lot of inventory, what happens is those things will normally get passed over. So if you're buying something, the only in a down market, you probably stay away from a walk-up, okay, unless it's a really outstanding deal. Also, what we call in the real estate business a negative view. So you're looking out the window and you see this brick wall, 8-10 feet away from your window. So generally, when the market's down, you have a lot more options. So stay away from negative view apartments. Also, high monthly charges. Okay, what does that mean exactly? What does high monthly charges mean? Well, if we're talking about a condominium, in general, a ballpark is that take the square footage of the apartment and multiply it by about 2 to 2.5, and that's about average. So if you have 1,000 square foot apartment and you're expecting in a doorman building with amenities, not to say that it's a new building, but that has some sort of amenities, maybe a roof deck, a gym, maybe a swimming pool, or some other things. 250 is average to a little high. If it's an older building with no amenities, not more than double. So not more than $2 for every per square foot, on a monthly basis. So 1,000 square feet, you think about $2,000 in terms of common charges and taxes. And it's also a ballpark around there for a co-op. Okay, so I remember a few years ago, about 6 years ago, I went to show an apartment to a friend, and it was on the Upper West Side, and the common charges were actually pretty low. It was a 650 square foot apartment, a junior one, almost a one bedroom, on Central Park West and 97th Street. And the price was, I believe it was like 550 or 575. And I think in his mind, he had the idea that he didn't want to go above slightly more than 500. So I explained to him that the common charges and taxes were, for this apartment, I think they were only about $800 or $900, if that, total. So it was really low. And so, but because he had his mind focused on a certain price, he wound up passing up on that apartment. He bought another apartment, but where the carrying charges were quite a bit higher. So fast forward now, 6 years, 7 years later, the $550,000 apartment that I was encouraging to buy with the low monthly charges is now easily an $800,000 apartment. His apartment, which he bought for about 500, a little more, is probably worth maybe 575, 590, something like that. So the common charges and taxes, it plays a role in the appreciation that you see. So just be on the lookout and be careful with properties that would be considered high. Now also, talk to your broker, or if you want, ask me. I'm happy to help. For a given building, if a building has no doorman and no gym, it's a smaller building, then you really shouldn't be paying, definitely shouldn't be paying more than double whatever the square footage is. So you kind of have to keep an eye on it, and it really depends on the amenities. But in general, try to steer clear of high monthly carrying charges. About, I think it was 3 years ago, I sold an apartment in Battery Park City, and that apartment, the monthly charges, it was about 1,300 square feet. The monthly charges were 6,200. So 6,200. And the reason why that is because the Battery Park City, if you own an apartment in Battery Park City, the building is on a land lease. So without getting too much into the land lease, what it means is that the land underneath the building is not owned by the building. So basically that land is rented from a nonprofit called the Battery Park City Authority. But so as a result, every building in Battery Park City has a different deal with their literally their landlord, the entity that owns the land under the building. And so because of that, that particular building has a terrible deal with the landlord. So as a result, the owners of the condo pay very high charges. And as a result, it was very difficult to sell that apartment. So let me just move on. So as far as what else should you avoid? So I kind of touched on that very briefly. Land lease buildings. Again, it's usually something that you want to stay away from. Okay, it means that the property underneath the building is not owned by the condo. So unfortunately, I had a good friend, that she bought in a building like that. I was not involved in the transaction, and X number of years later, the amount of rent that they were going to pay for the land was set to escalate a tremendous amount. And as a result, in came a developer, an investor that basically bought out the majority of the apartments. And now my friend will be lucky to be able to get out even anywhere close to what she paid for the apartment. I guess it's probably 10, 15 years ago. So in most other situations, you'd be looking at like a hefty return, like a nice amount of appreciation in a decade plus. But in this case, since it was a land lease and the land lease was ending not that long after she bought it, she was kind of stuck. Also along those same lines are small condo buildings. If you have a condo that only has, let's say, 10 units or less, what happens when the roof goes? What happens when the boiler needs to be fixed? What happens when, anything that happens is only going to be divided among a few. So it means that it's going to hit each person pretty hard. Okay, so in general, it might be nice to live in a brownstone, let's say, and it's kind of maybe romantic to see there's only 4 units in the building and you're one of those only 4 units. But just be aware that if anything goes wrong, the amount of your responsibility is going to be, it's going to be pretty high. So just keep that in mind. So I mean, as with all of these ideas of what not to buy, I mean, there's always circumstances where there'll be exceptions to the rule. If you get an amazing price on something, maybe it compensates for the fact that you're don't have a view or doesn't get much light, the apartment, or it's a walk-up. So, but only if if you're really getting something that's worth a lot, that you're getting compensated for it. Also, unless you're a person that's been through renovations before, or you have a really great contractor, or you're getting a tremendous value, renovation projects, especially in a co-op, not the best thing to buy into. Okay, figure that if you're going to do a renovation project of a co-op, and you're going to do multiple things, let's say a kitchen, bathroom, flooring, maybe electrical, like almost a gut renovation, you're talking about easily 6 months, you might be a year. Don't forget, when you're in a building, every time that you're doing something more onerous in a co-op, but even in a condo, they have, the building has to check what you're doing. The building has to see that you're doing things according to the way that they want them done. And that adds costs. For example, when I did just a small renovation in the apartment I had before the one I have now, I did the floors. Once I was putting the floors in, I found out from the building that you need to put a sound dampener, which is pretty normal. So that added probably about $1,000 or $2,000 more to the renovation in a small space. Also, really knowing what the pitfalls are with a renovation. We could do a whole a whole discussion about what to watch out for in a renovation. But just in my building, I've known a few people that they started to remove the old floors, and in some cases there was asbestos below that, and that triggers other steps that also you need to do, maybe an inspection, maybe a remediation. And one person that I knew, it added $20,000 to their renovation just because of the additional steps that they need to take. So unless you really know what you're doing and it really makes tremendous sense, I would say that there's going to be enough property to choose from in the next year or two, so you can stay away from large renovation projects. And then, just what to buy, what to buy. Buy properties that have low monthly charges, okay? If you have low carrying charges, you're gonna end up, you pay less monthly. The calculation that you make as far as how much property you can afford has directly to do with how much you lay out monthly. And it's the same thing that down the road, let's say you buy a 1-bedroom apartment, you live in it for a few years, and then you decide you're gonna grow your family, and then you want to move someplace else with more space, maybe a house with a yard. So then that apartment, if it's a condo, you can easily just go ahead and rent it. But how much you're getting every month, or if you can cover your existing mortgage, is going to have to do with how high those monthly charges. One client that I've been speaking to, since she's in a co-op, it's rare that a co-op will let you rent as long as you want. Usually it's 2 years, and then you either have to move back in or sell it. But some co-ops can be a little flexible because they understand that people do need to rent. But at the same time, one co-op that I know right here on the Upper West Side, they charge you a sublet fee, and the sublet fee goes up every single year that you continue to sublet. So they're not going to tell you don't sublet it, but they charge you more and more every year until eventually it's just basically too much monthly, and then that person went ahead and sold. Also, another thing you could look at is the number of apartments that are for sale. Like if you go onto Street Easy and you look on Riverside Boulevard, you put in one of those buildings that used to be known as Trump Place, or Trump, have Trump's name on it. So those buildings, you'll see there might be 400 units, and there's 30 apartments for sale, or there's it's a 200 unit building with 30 apartments for sale. Yet in other buildings on the Upper West Side, you might have a building with 400 units, like the one that I live in, and there's 3 apartments for sale. It's literally nothing. So that tells you something. It tells you the building's very stable, and that's going to be good for you for value. And then also just common sense. If you see things that are priced well per square foot, previous sales indicate, let's say $1,500 per square foot. So 1,000 square feet apartment costs you 1.5 million, and you're seeing something that's asking only 1.4 million or 1.35. So you're going to see a lot of action on something like that, and obviously something like that sounds like a really good value. And then also apartments with just great light and views. This is an apartment that I was selling not so long ago, and south-facing apartment, Central Park views, the reservoir, all the way down to Midtown. So everybody loves an apartment with light and views. And there's many other things that we can talk about as far as things that you can either watch out for, or things that would make more sense to buy into. Okay, but I think I'm gonna stop it there. And if you guys have any questions, you can always let me know. If you make comments here on the video, I'll go back and take a look at it, or feel free to email me or get in contact with me on social media. But just to sum up, I think what not to buy: don't buy things that are odd, like walk-ups, negative views. Don't buy a property with very high monthly charges. Okay. Never buy, if you can avoid it. 99 and 44/100th percent of the time, it's never a good idea to buy a land lease, something in a land lease building. So unfortunately, that'll knock out all of Battery Park City, but still there are exceptions. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining me again here on the live, and I'll be back next Monday. And if you have any questions, let me know. See you soon.